So you're telling me that it's unconstitutional to keep them chained to their bed 24 hours a day, waddling in their own shit? I can't do that?
No, you can't. You can't do that. Now you could do that if you were in a torture chamber.
Yeah, if you were.
If this was medieval torture, yeah, you could do that. No problem.
1500s, 1400s, sure, by all means. Because, there's no laws.
Goes down. But you do you.
But in modern society, no, you can't do that.
Welcome to Shadows and Sightings, the paranormal podcast where we talk about all things spooky. I am Taylor.
I'm Nick.
And today we are going to be talking about Pennhurst Asylum. So just a spoiler alert, this is going to be pretty dark, pretty heavy at times. So if anything such as hard derogatory language is a trigger or anything for you, maybe skip this episode. But
definitely going to be talking about
like mental retardation.
We can't say that. Mental retardation?
I mean, it's what these people were afflicted with. I mean, there's one nicer ways to put it, but it's...
yeah, but I thought there was like...
mental incompetence.
I think it's just mental disabilities.
But I mean, mental retardation is a thing.
Is that... like... But talk about traumatic history.
But these terms are medical condition terms.
Medical,
I'm not.
No,
it's not like calling somebody
exactly.
the hard R word.
Like you can't do that.
You can't do that anymore. But like mental retardation, learning disabilities, physical abuse, physical violence towards patients.
Yes, definitely going to be talking about abuse today. Physical abuse, mental abuse. So if that is something that is triggering for you, just a fair warning that this episode will include those topics today.
Yeah.
And because it was unfortunate that these things happened at Penhurst, which we'll get into here shortly.
Yeah, for sure. But otherwise, where do you want to start on this episode, Nick? You want to start at the beginning with a little bit of history of Penhurst? Join us, won't you? Sit back, relax, get a snack, get a drink. As
we go down the timeline of Pennhurst Asylum, the horrible, dark, traumatic history... No, in all reality, though, Pennhurst Asylum. So
yeah, but in all reality, that place was fucked. That place sucked ass.
It did. Which, I mean, it's unfortunate because I think its inception, like when it really did have good intentions.
Yeah, it started with great intentions.
Like the idea of, hey, let's create this facility where we can house individuals with mental disabilities,
physical disabilities,
mentally challenged individuals, physical disabilities, where we can kind of try to help rehabilitate them. And I think with the documentary that we saw, it kind of talked about the intention of, it was supposed to be a short-term thing. They show up, we rehabilitate them, and then they're back out in society. And I think that was even how it was kind of pitched to some of the parents and the caregivers.
Right. And it was started by like nuns and just general caretakers, and they moved these people to the asylum once it was built, because the state had the funding to take care of these people, whereas they didn't. Yep. But like you said, the goal was to rehabilitate them, or at least help them like deal with their disabilities in day-to-day life, that they could reintegrate them into society. And then they built this, it almost like they built this facility too well. They made it too nice that at that point, nobody left. And then it just became overcrowded.
Yeah. So it opened up in 1908. And was originally called Eastern Pennsylvania State Institution for the Feeble-Minded and Epileptic. Penhurst was designed to house and care for people with developmental disabilities and other conditions. It also originally aimed to provide education, medical care, and vocational training for its residents. And like I said, the intention was, I think, short-term was the idea. Mm-hmm. So you show up, I'm not sure what the ideal level of care or timeline of a care plan was back in the day.
Right.
But typically, nowadays with therapy, we're thinking 6 months to a year, depending on how severe, the issue is that you're dealing with. So, yeah, you show up here, 1908, get your timed in with like your caretakers. You kind of go through the rehabilitative process. You get shipped back to your family, and by then you should have skills that can kind of help you be a little bit more self-independent. So.
Right.
But like you had mentioned, by the mid 20th century, it became very overcrowded. thousands of residents living in conditions that were far below acceptable standards.
That's putting it lightly.
Yeah. Reports of abuse, neglect, and inhumane treatment surfaced, where residents were often restrained, underfed, and subjected to harsh discipline. This, of course, would carry on for, a multitude of years up until like the late 60s, early 70s, when there was a report made, which we'll kind of go over here shortly. Bill Baldini was, I think, a CBS reporter who worked in Philly. Got a tip that said, hey, you want a crazy story? Come, do a piece or expose on this Pennhurst Asylum place. He shows up.
He's like, if it's half as much, it's like if what half of what you're telling me is true, we've got a story.
Yeah, exactly.
He shows up and it's beyond his comprehension.
He couldn't even believe it. He was like, I was like dumbfounded at how crazy this was. But because of that case, it kind of brought it to light, and from there was I guess we would consider the downfall of Penhurst was like from that moment forward up until it shuts down in the mid 80s.
Mm-hmm. Of course, now it's in kind of a dilapidated state, more or less ruins of what the building used to be, but it is also home now to a true haunted attraction. During I guess they do it like a year round for special events and stuff, but it is now still being at least used in that capacity that people were already going for the haunted happenings that are supposedly taking place in Penhurst, but now it's a full-on haunted attraction that you can go visit for like Halloween.
It'd be pretty cool.
That'd be
to check out.
Fucking terrifying.
Honestly, insane asylums don't scare me that much.
Really?
It's the part what does scare me is the part where it's like the kids.
Yeah.
Like anything like kid related, like that
just does it for you.
It's terrible. It's awful.
See, I don't know. I'm like on both sides of the coin on that subject because the facility itself and who they're housing isn't supposed to be scary because these are real people with real problems that they can't control. Sure. But if you've ever been to a place, and my job takes me to some of these places sometimes where these people, are that way, and they just start randomly screaming or they start randomly crying or they are talking to people that aren't there. And that is some creepy stuff. And to have that happen, that you can see it from people that are still with you, translating into people that you can't see anymore, to be like a haunting where that stuff is still happening. Oh my gosh, that'd be scary.
That's true. My first job out of college was at was also in Pennsylvania, up in South Mountain, working with juvenile delinquents. Interesting enough, the facility actually was an old tuberculosis hospital back in the day. So it resembled very much like what Penhurst looked like. So like the brick buildings, it was on a campus like that.
No windows. Well, I guess they would have windows.
Well, they had windows.
Because that was one of the treatments for tuberculosis.
Yeah, so it was on a campus like that. Actually, there was a state hospital across the street where there were actually mentally ill individuals that were being treated there. Mm-hmm. You could look out the window and see it right there, big building. But yeah, I worked on this unit, and these were juvenile offenders and stuff. So I worked in like detention, where kids were being held for like they ran away from home or something like that. Mm-hmm. But apparently that was a haunted place as well.
I believe it.
And yeah, but you would hear things, you would see things in there. Like you said, some of these kids, even though they were there for like petty crimes and stuff, some of them also had like severe mental health.
Right.
Yeah, so you'd walk by and you see like a kid like talking to somebody that's like not there, or they encourage you like not to read through the files, but like I would sometimes just to kind of get all right, what exactly am I working with today, and and like seeing some of the mental disorders that I was kind of dealing with, I was like, whew, like okay, so I could tread lightly around this kid,
right.
Those situations. So I can only imagine what you're saying, like for the things that you've seen. Now these people have passed, and I was schizophrenic in life. Now I'm a ghost, and I'm also schizophrenic, and like it's like Uber charged,
right? And that's the discussion that I feel like we could have and never even touch Pennhurst Asylum in this episode. But that's like one of those where if you're schizophrenic in life and then you pass on, if you're a religious person, ideally you're healed of all your ailments once you pass and go to heaven, or
depending on
whatever your
religion.
So it goes back to like what you believe a ghost would be. Is it just energy that's been imprinted into an area, or the traumas and stuff like that, or the emotions? I guess would be the best way to put it. Because being schizophrenic in life and then being schizophrenic in death, That's a real shit end of the stick. It's just not fair. Like, even in death, you're not free. So,
oof, yeah. Well, I mean, it could be where like residual haunts come from.
Yeah.
Because the one guy was talking about like the gunshot or whatever.
Right.
It seems that residual haunts from all of the research that we've done, all the videos we've seen and everything, they're always connected to some form of severe trauma or like a traumatic event.
Right. That seems to be or just energy in general over a long course of time, a long period of time. Houses, people live in houses for years. I mean, I don't really know how the process would work that your energy would imprint into a place, but.
Well, I mean, it would make sense if Penhurst has residual hauntings because
of all the trauma.
Yeah, well, that started. It opens up in 1908, and the thing we watched
was there for 70-something years.
7 years, but the one gentleman, that was like head of like the Pennhurst committee or something on that documentary we watched, he said that they had like actual written records of congressmen from back in like 1910, so not super long after it opened, already stating that, hey, this is like overcrowded.
Yeah.
Like this is
it didn't take long. It was like the first like couple years that it was already, like you said, they went in probably expecting it to be a short turnaround for these patients, and then they end up staying their whole life.
And of course, it's not surprising that happened. Some of the common issues that they ran into were lack of funding,
lack of doctors, lack of nurses, orderlies. I mean, the guy was saying that there was no toilet paper in the stalls. There's not enough bathrooms. It's just literally any modern convenience you can imagine. There was none of that.
It kind of runs akin to what you would hear about with how some of these prison conditions are like today.
Yeah.
Like I saw something, a news report a couple years ago where there was a prison, I think in Mississippi or Alabama or something like that, where the inmates were literally complaining about having sickness because the sewage system was like not being taken care of. So they're just living in this like filth in this prison. This is like 2021,
Which is a thing you just don't think would happen at this day and age. But
so to see that these were some of the issues at Penhurst.
Yeah.
The one gentleman was in the documentary, not the documentary, but the expose in the 60s called "Suffer the Little Children." Bill Baldini is interviewing, multiple staff at Penhurst, and there was a point in that expose where he asked I'm assuming it was the superintendent at the time, what was the situation where you requested supplies or whatever and you were denied, and he said, well, I tried to order bras for the female residents and it was denied. and Bill asked him, well, wait, why was it denied? It's like they said I needed to provide justification for an order. So literally on the paper, I wrote self-evident and sent it back in. They denied it a second time.
Crazy.
To which he's kind of sitting there like shaking his head like, I don't know what you guys want me to say. Like, we need bras. So he gets a doctor roped in. I think eventually they finally got it passed through. But it seems like the issue overall was this was a systemic issue. Mm-hmm. And it was almost like the higher-ups, whoever was in charge, were kind of looking at these individuals as like, these are not people.
Right.
And we're justifying the mistreatment because we're like, why are we getting, they're not people.
Yeah. It's almost like a zoo.
Exactly. And
or something.
Which, I mean, if you want to talk about where that kind of stems from, like the whole eugenics thing, and it kind of seems like was the driving force for a lot of that.
Yeah. And eugenics was basically a premise that started around Nazi Germany and the whole idea of the superior race. So when that ideology kind of made its way to America, the first people really affected by it were the mentally handicapped and the people with birth defects and stuff like that.
Wasn't it? I thought it was the other way around, which I thought was really interesting.
Oh, it might have been.
Wasn't it like the American guy?
Oh, it could have been.
It was like, and then, but Germany, like
they took it and just
ran with it.
Yeah. Well, I mean, I guess it was around the same time, but yeah, the Holocaust was the Germany running with it and then really acting on it was the Holocaust. But Penhurst could be even kind of before that, because these were people that they were deemed not members of society at all, and they were nothing more than they classified them as imbeciles and feeble-minded.
Yeah, like idiot. What was like the
idiots?
wording?
Yeah,
Idiots,
and like keep them separate.
Yeah, oh, God,
like
awful.
don't show, don't tell. These aren't real people.
We don't talk about.
them. We don't look at them. They're not better. They're worse. They're not real people. Essentially, it's just a mindset that is just hard to imagine in today's world. But I mean, back then it was so normal, I guess.
It was almost the way that they talked about it. It almost seemed like it was common knowledge, you know.
I mean, obviously, for it to make its way to Germany and then end up happening what happened over there, it was a concept that a lot of people bought into. So,
which I agree with. Like I don't agree with it. I'm saying like it's. I can agree.
Okay, go ahead, Nick.
I'm saying like. I agree with you. Like we're like how it was considered so common back then. It was because they didn't really talk about it. And if you see like movies today, like sort of like the way it was depicted, like we saw Nosferatu, and this takes place
like late 1800s, right?
It's either like mid 1800s or late 1700s, like around that. I think it's like 1850 or something like that. But yeah, there's even then, like the one doctor in the movie, he's trying to create kind of like a Pennhurst Asylum-esque kind of hospital, but he's trying to make it forward thinking. He's like, we have to stop.
Spoiler alert for Nosferatu 2024.
Yeah, if you're gonna watch it, like, if you're trying to be like a forward thinking doctor, where he's like, okay, we can't treat these individuals like less than human. They're still people.
Right.
You know, we have to like change the way we kind of view. And treat these individuals. We actually want to make a difference. Which Penhurst...
they didn't do at Penhurst.
They didn't, and Penhurst wasn't the first failure like that.
No.
It's all the way back to like the 1850s and beforehand, state-run hospitals. That's what it was. It was just... I think Penhurst was kind of finally the first instance where it really put it on the map. And I was like, okay.
It's like you think of it this way, the state... Imagine the level of care that is dedicated to fixing roads in a state. And how they just take forever and nothing ever gets done.
Yeah.
And then when it does get done, it breaks in the next year anyway. Imagine applying those same metrics to actual people with disabilities.
That's Pennhurst Asylum.
That's Pennhurst. That's any state-run asylum is.
It's just awful. So we have this idea of eugenics, which is just like this terrible, separate us from them with the idea.
It's segregation at the highest form.
Yeah, but with the idea of we're trying to create this master race. So any sort of imperfections, any sort of quote unquote blemishes in society, we're gonna keep those separated. We're gonna only take the healthy ones, and that
involves skin color, eye color, hair color, learning abilities, learning disabilities, like you were saying, birthmarks, anything like that. If you had any of that stuff, you were less than dirt.
Hitler and the Nazis really honed in on the whole Aryan, blonde hair, blue eyes kind of thing.
Which is ironic that he didn't have it either of those things, but that's a discussion for another day.
I always question that, like in school when we learned about that, and we were hear about the whole eugenics thing, and then like the Aryans and all that, and then I would look at him, I was like, man, either this dude was like the ultimate salesman, or these people were really fucking dumb. Like,
probably both.
Like, there's been so many studies on that too, of like. Social psychology is like how it could it's one thing when you have a few people jump on board, but to convince like the masses in the way that it happened.
Well, you think about it, and we're kind of getting off the rails here already, but you think about it, they're coming out of World War I. Germany's like decimated. They have nothing else going on. Then finally they have this leader that comes and promises them all this. Germany's rise back to power is going to just follow me, and we're going to be a superpower again. And
he gave him a scapegoat, which is like the Jews and all that.
Yeah. So easy enough to follow somebody that's willing to promise you all that stuff.
It's a script.
In a desperate time. Yeah. But anyways, we digress. So, like you were saying, the expose comes out in the 60s.
So
you want to go back to that, or you want to go...
Expose comes out in the 60s. It's like, if you guys get a chance, you can actually find it on YouTube.
Yeah.
It was I think on NBC. It was a 4-part or 5-part expose series. So they filmed it and they released it over the series of 5 nights, talking about Penhurst. That came out in 1968. If you go on YouTube, just look up "Suffer the Little Children Expose," and you'll see the documentary pop up. So that happens. That goes through, and then 1974, there's a court case, Halderman versus Pennhurst, in which Terry Lee Halderman, a former resident, files a lawsuit against Penhurst, alleging abuse, neglect, and violation of residents' rights. This case ended up becoming a landmark in disability law, eventually leading to the closure of Penhurst, but also kind of paved the way for future court proceedings in which they kind of took
like reformation
and
the mental disability healthcare system.
Yep. I'm sure the American Disabilities Act probably kind of came because of that, or at least was heavily influenced by that came in there somehow. So, things like that. So it was a good thing.
Yeah.
In 1977, there's a federal court ruling that favors Halderman. So, yeah, that case starts in 1974. It doesn't conclude until 1977. So they were in proceedings for almost 4 years.
Yeah. Conditions never getting better.
Yeah. In that, quote, the conditions at Penhurst violate the constitutional rights of its residents. Oh, I guess we actually do have to give them toilet paper.
Yeah. Huh. You're telling me we can't keep these people in cribs for their entire lives and never let them out?
Let me get this straight. You're telling me that it's unconstitutional to keep them chained to their bed 24 hours a day, waddling in their own shit. I can't do that?
No, you can't. You can't do that. Now you could do that if you were in a torture chamber.
Yeah, if
this was medieval torture, yeah, you could do that. No problem.
This was 1500s, 1400s, sure, by all means. Because, there's no laws.
Go down. But you do you.
But in modern society, no, you can't do that.
In the modern society here in 1977, can't do that.
You unethical piece of shit. The ruling in 1977 mandates deinstitutionalization. Oh my God.
Deinstitutionalization.
And transfer of residents to community-based care facilities. So essentially, you can't do it anymore. And I think because of that, although we still have state-run facilities today, I think after that court case, we're kind of starting to get away from just the horrid conditions of the state-run facilities like that. Mm-hmm. 1980s rolls around. Throughout the 80s, there's the transition and closure. Penhurst starts beginning to transfer his residents to smaller community-based programs, and then the institution gradually shuts down its operations, and its population decreases significantly up until 1987, where it's the official closure. Penhurst closes stores after nearly 80 years of operation, and of course, Halderman and Penhurst continues to shape disability rights and deinstitutionalization efforts across the U.S. In the 90s, many of the buildings were left abandoned, fall into decay. If you visit Penhurst today, you'll kind of see a lot of graffiti, a lot of what's it called? Urbex photography and stuff. So people breaking in and just taking pictures of what it almost looks like it was untouched.
Right.
It's kind of not like when you look at photos of Chernobyl where you could it's kind of creepy because it happened so quickly and they evacuated overnight. Yeah. So it's literally everything is a snapshot of what it was back in the 70s.
Right.
This is more of just decay.
A gradual degradation.
Yeah. 2000s, paranormal investigations and urban explorers begin visiting the site. And in 2010, the site is partially repurposed as the Pennhurst Asylum haunted attraction, sparking debates about its use as entertainment. I think it's a great idea.
Hey, if it's going to be just sitting there, why not use it?
Do something with it. I didn't know it was so big.
Yeah?
That's what she said. I didn't know it was it was so huge.
It was multiple buildings.
I thought it was just, when you first told me about Pennhurst Asylum, I thought it was literally just it's probably one state-run building or whatever. Yeah, no, it was a fucking campus.
It was a complex, yeah.
What was it, 18 buildings or something like that on God knows how many acres?
Oh, here you go. At open, it was 112 acres. At its close, it was 1,400 acres, with just buildings upon buildings. It even had its own railroad system.
How many acres did you say it was on?
At open, it was 112 acres, and then at close, it was 1,400 acres.
Okay, so that's huge, I guess, in relative terms of, I guess, a state-run hospital facility. I was trying to compare it and find something to compare it to. In this case, it's relatively small compared to Penn State, where just University Park, its main campus, is currently sitting on 8,500 acres.
That's the college?
The main university.
Penn State College?
Penn State, yeah.
But I mean, it takes over the whole town at that point.
Which, yeah, I mean, I guess, Penn State probably is a university.
Yeah,
too.
I mean, but just looking at the campus view of 1934, I mean, you can see the scale. It's just enormous.
It's huge, yeah. So you got to think, that huge of a facility and that's overrun?
Right.
Oh my gosh. You can imagine at its peak, at its height, there were more than 3,500 people at Penhurst, which is nuts. So
you're looking at an establishment that's supposed to only have 500 people at it, and here they are 3,000 people over.
Oh my gosh, at its height. So you can imagine what the horrid conditions were. And do you remember like what some of those conditions were?
Yeah, they would have just rooms full of people they would have like beds, and that was it. And it would be like 15, 16, 17, 18, 19, 20 beds per room. There was no bed sheets. From what I understand, there was like no bed sheets, or if there were bed sheets, they wouldn't change the bed sheets. So they would just lay in the same bed and filth and defecate on themselves. And because they wouldn't change them, they wouldn't let them go to the bathroom. In that expose, Baldini said that he walked into one room that had 80 iron ribs inside of this room, and the kids were in the cribs were anywhere from like 6 months to 5 years old, and their legs were so tiny because they had never been out of the crib. They'd never been able to walk. They were just neglected. They were just And then he's like asked
dystrophy.
He asked the orderlies why they're not allowed out of the cribs, and they're like, because there's only 2 of us that work here. So they just never took them out of the crib, and they would just sit and groan and wallow around in their own filth forever. I mean, until if he would have came along, who knows how long that would have went on.
Right? That would have been awful. Could you imagine if that shit was still going on today?
And that's just your life. Yeah.
That place would explode. if that expose came out in like modern 2024, everybody would be talking about that.
But to be fair, though, I don't think that something like that could happen in 2024 because of
stuff like,
you could take your phone and be like, look at all this. That's like, look at this happening in here. It would be all over TikTok.
Yeah, exactly. So yeah, a lot of horrible living conditions, lots of physical abuse.
Yeah, some of the inmates reported being beaten, lacerated. If they were misbehaving, they would get beaten. One particular form of control was if a patient would bite the orderlies. More often than once, they would send them to the dentist, and the dentist had a chair and a rusty set of pliers, and he would just pull their teeth out. No Novocaine, nothing. God. Just pull their teeth out. The easiest way to fix somebody from biting you is to pull their teeth out.
That is freaking horrific. Well, like what? Okay, so you know how a butcher, butchers cattle and stuff like that, and you would think that mentally that would do something to you after a while. You would think.
Oh, I'm sure.
Like maybe like your level of empathy is like shifted. Oh, and it kind of borderlines on the cusp of like, I'm just one cow slaughtering away from becoming a psychopath. The dentist in this situation, mentally, he had to have like not been there. Like, do you?
Well, it's like one of those things. Yeah, it's like where the profession starts. And this could have been a dentist that truly believed in eugenics too. I mean, we can't put that out of the question.
That's
this
true.
is a person that thinks that what he's doing is
for the
correct,
for the greater good.
Yeah.
So he probably honestly views these individuals as like not human,
right?
Or so to him, is it easy for him, or is it that
or is this just a dentist coming out of college or whatever? And this is the only here's
his first job, kind of thing.
Do this, and if you don't do it, then you're never getting anywhere else. But still, like that would be
like your first. Or what's even worse, I think, even worse scenario is he's doing this knowing like, okay, this is wrong, but continues to do it anyways.
Yeah.
Like he's ignoring his moral compass or whatever.
Right.
Oh, that's awful.
Or even could be more likely scenario. It's not a dentist at all. It's just some dude that rips these people's teeth out.
Yeah, and they're calling him the dentist. I wouldn't put it past him.
He's just an orderly. It's like, all right, bring him in and yanks him out.
Where'd you go to dentistry school? Dentistry what?
I thought this was a Spanish class.
The what? I could. That's just awful. That's terrible. So yeah, the situations like that. If you'd mentioned like the lacerations. The orderlies would literally beat the residents there if they were just to calm them down, would break bones and stuff like that, and just send them on to the infirmary. And there's like X-rays you can find of these like shattered bones and things like that. And you can imagine you're just a kid who had like a temper tantrum, and in order for this orderly to like kind of get you to calm down, instead of like trying to provide you like empathetic care, listening and trying to ease the situation.
He just drops an elbow dry. He comes off the top rope
on you, picks you up and launches you across the room and like breaks your rib cage or something like that. Like the conditions were just like abysmal. So it's no wonder that this.
And that documentary, I wonder if that footage they were showing was actual real footage of that, or if it was just like dramatized or whatever. But that was horrific looking footage where they were all just like standing around, jumping up around and naked.
No, that was the actual footage.
That was actual footage.
That was actual footage of that going down.
Yeah. What was that called? Haunted History, Pennhurst Asylum. If that's the documentary we were referring to.
The other documentary, if you get a chance, Haunted History, Pennhurst Asylum. Yeah, those tidbit clips were actual recordings of them going through. And yeah,
it was almost so bad that you didn't know if it was real or not. To me,
did you notice how I thought it was kind of interesting? Did you notice how in a lot of those shots you could tell that they had the light from the camera on?
Yeah,
because it was probably like the lighting conditions were probably so shitty.
I'm sure it was pitch black.
Like pitch black in there. It almost looked like they were walking around there with a flashlight because it was very low light and visibility, and you could tell it was almost like it was being filmed at night. But no, I think the lights, they should have like electricity or whatever.
Yeah. And these buildings are huge, and their windows are almost non-existent.
Yeah, and like and it could have been too that maybe that was just like another way. Well, let's maybe try to control them this way by
depriving them of their senses.
They're like, yeah, exactly.
Sensory deprivation treatment, probably, or something.
I'm sure some bullshit.
But they also would subject them to shock therapy, which is if they misbehave, they would just electrocute them. And then if that didn't work, and after they removed their teeth and after they beat the shit out of them, they would just lobotomize them.
Which is fucking... I'm not laughing because it's like a funny thing to laugh at.
It's like a defense mechanism at this point.
Yeah, because
like you can't laugh. Like you just, it's so horrifying.
Because you can't put it past. Just when you think humans could like get low,
right?
Just like, or with this story specifically, it just like continues to get lower. It's like, oh my god! So now you have all these poor children being like lobotomized or whatever.
I mean, imagine you're just a kid in Penhurst and you have a temper tantrum one day. So the first day you're there, you miss your family. This is a new place to you. So
you're probably scared.
You kind of lash out a little bit.
Yeah, absolutely.
Somebody comes in and beats the shit out of you. The next day you're scared and alone again. You just got beaten half to death. You're probably crying out for somebody to help you. They come back in, beat the shit out of you again. This time they take you down to the shock chamber room and then electrocute you and be like, okay, don't do that again or else you're gonna get this again. I mean, you have a mental handicap. You don't understand what's happening to you.
You can't process what's going on, all these terrible, complex emotions.
And then the next day, you do the same thing again because, you don't know what's happening. You can't process why you're getting punished for for missing your family.
And up until that point, the only way that you've ever really understood how to process your emotions was to act out that way. Like to you, that is quote unquote normal because that's how you kind of express the things that you're feeling.
Right. So then they beat you, they shock you, and then now they're taking you into this operating room, and the next thing you know, you're lobotomized. And now you're certainly no longer a functioning member of society now.
I'm not sure.
Or in some cases, they speculated there's a tunnel system below Penhurst that they would use to transport supplies during the winter months, but they would also transport patients to other wings of the facility that way. They speculated that if a patient was quote unquote out of line too often, instead of lobotomizing them, they would just take them down into the tunnels, kill them, and throw them in a crematorium, and just nobody would ever notice they were gone.
So did they actually ever corroborate that with like, that seems like one of those things where like I would not even in the slightest be surprised if that actually occurred.
Right. I don't think that they ever confirmed it, but it was heavily implied that there was patients that would just go missing.
And the
families didn't care. The families were just like, get rid of this. We don't want this responsibility anymore.
That's even worse, right?
Yeah.
Like,
so they would just take them into the tunnels, beat them to death, and then throw them in a crematorium, and then they're gone.
That is just like awful, and it makes you wonder where it's like those kinds of horrific situations, and you can imagine like a parent or a family that sent their kid there, and they honestly had great intentions, like they're reaching out for actual help.
Right.
They send them to this, Penhurst. Penhurst is being advertised as this, beacon of hope. Send your children here, those with mental disabilities will rehabilitate them and get them back, to you, functioning better than they were before. We'll give them the skills that they need to succeed.
And also maybe give you skills in the process of how to deal with these things going forward.
How what can you do to kind of help ensure their success? So you buy into it, you send them there, and I'm more than sure Penhurst was not probably giving the families the full truth of what was going on as far as the treatment.
Not.
Like, oh yeah, he's fine. He's
making great strides in his recovery.
He's succeeding. He's
while they're like cattle prodding him.
Yeah, he's like limping away or whatever. So the whole trauma thing like that. They show up. You get beat there. You go through that whole traumatic experience, and then they end up lobotomizing you.
Yeah. I
am more than sure Penhurst did not seek consent, because you got to think, this is before HIPAA. This is before, ADA, the American Disabilities Act, before the era of current medicine where you have to give consent for treatment. Right. Yeah, they didn't do that back then.
They probably, took him down, lobotomized him, and then the family checks in the next day and they're like, yeah, we had to lobotomize him because he had another lashing out. Yep. He attacked an orderly.
And right there, and for those of you who don't know what like a lobotomy does, essentially, it essentially turns into a human zombie.
Right. It severs your nerves in your frontal lobe, I think.
Yeah, I think they sever the connection, and essentially it turns you into a vegetable. Essentially, right. You lose all emotional affect. You're very, very rare if ever has lobotomy been successful. It'll make you quiet.
Sure, because you can't think anymore.
You can't think anymore. You're not like all there. You're pretty much just in a vegetative state. Right. So imagine, seeing that, and that's what you come back to as a parent, and okay, you've lost like your child or whatever, and those poor people. I can't even imagine what that must have been like.
So that kind of will lead us into our next part of this is, with so much despair, so much emotion, sadness, torture, pain, et cetera, the list goes on. Is that why Penhurst is considered one of the most haunted places in America?
I would most definitely say that if Pennhurst Asylum is haunted, mm-hmm. whether it be residual hauntings or just hauntings in general, I am more than willing to bet that it has to do with the horrific conditions and the trauma that happened there. There's just like really no way around it. If the breeding ground, if like the cocktail for a haunting is traumatic experience plus
cocktail for a haunting,
traumatic experience plus sustained trauma over the course of a length of time, like
plus tragic end.
Penhurst is like that
cocktail. Checks the box.
It checks all the boxes.
Yeah. So Penhurst has definitely become kind of, I use the term a lot, but a mecca of paranormal enthusiasts. Yep. So while we were watching that documentary, a couple of things they touched on were a couple of things that would happen to them during the course of their visits there would be scratches that just appear on their body after they spent time in one of the numerous buildings. They would hear curse words being shouted at them from disembodied voices. The one guy who pretty much starts the documentary is showing you through this place, and he's like, oh, well, I had this crowbar thrown at me while we were walking through, and I caught this on audio, and you hear the crowbar hit the wall and drop to the floor with a hilarious scream. The
scream got me.
But yeah. So things being thrown, disembodied voices, scratches. In the Quaker building, which was it was a building for the most severe challenges, so the most violent patients they would have. Some accounts claim to see a woman in white standing by the windows, and then they also caught an EVP in there while they were investigating that said, "Untie me." So could it be a patient who was tied up and probably beaten? Could have been. I think so.
Did it say in the documentary or anything you read about which of the halls has like the most activity? Was it the one with the kids, the Candyland or whatever?
I think that falls under the Mayflower Hall.
Is that okay?
Yeah.
So it's like a subsection within Mayflower?
Yes, okay. I believe so. Because that also included the dentist chair, quote unquote, the dentist chair.
Candylanded or Mayflower?
Candyland was in there, and the dentist chair was in all this Mayflower Hall.
God, awful.
This was a hall for the most lowest functioning patients. So the severely mentally handicapped kids, the mentally handicapped that couldn't move past being kids, things like that. So these were the ones that society really had cast out in this eugenics philosophy that they've had.
Situations where it's obviously obvious children, little kids in there, but then of course individuals who are in their 20s or 30s that still have
the mental capacity of a 6-year-old.
Yeah, exactly.
Almost, I don't want to say, but probably in their mind, total lost causes. no rehabilitation is going to happen for these kids. They're never going to be part of society.
Any of these eugenic fanaticist freaks, exactly. They didn't see them, and they can say what they want. Well, we still see them as people. They're individuals. Fuck off. No, you didn't. Yeah. You treated them like
they were punching bags.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah. So there was reports of people investigating being poked, sounds of running up and down the hallways, and an EVP that was captured saying, "Don't leave me," when somebody's in there investigating, so they think maybe that could have been a child reaching out for help.
It was the psychic.
The psychic
from Philly. Yep.
Yeah. Like I said, the dentist chair, we've already kind of covered that, but there was an EVP captured in that room saying, "I'll kill you," coinciding with a report of a large shadow figure. A gentleman in this documentary, at least, called him Clyde or Charles or Chuck or something like that.
The maintenance guy?
Yeah.
With the
hand card.
With the hand.
Yeah, he's like an evil spirit walking around, like trying to keep the secrets.
Handlebar mustache. He was supposed
to look like Paul Tuttle. If you guys have if anybody's ever watched American Choppers,
and apparently he was like notorious. When I saw that drawing of him, I kind of in my soul got the vibe of he gave me John Wayne Gacy vibes.
Oh,
and if for those of you if you guys know anything about like John Wayne Gacy, where on the outside, he was this very charismatic salesman type of individual, but then he was just doing these horrific
behind closed doors.
And when I saw that, they kind of gave me that same vibe, and I was like, this maintenance guy was probably walking around this campus,
beating the crap out of people,
beating the shit out of these kids, probably doing things more horrific, because it kind of sounded like he was picking favorites. And when I say picking favorites, I mean like if you cross him in any way, he was going to make it his life mission to make your life hell.
Yeah.
But he kind of gave me that Two-Face vibe where he's walking around. I'm just the innocent maintenance man.
Just my 9 to 5. I'm just here to work.
Yeah, exactly. And like he's like friendly
blue
with
collar
all the
lunch
staff.
pail type.
Yeah, all friendly with the staff or whatever.
And as soon as he shuts that door to go into the living conditions, it's just
he just like snaps his neck and is like, "What'd you say to me?" kind of thing. Yeah, that was the vibe I got from him.
Yeah, for sure. So he's supposedly associated with this large shadow figure that people see. Also in the Mayflower building, like we were saying, there's a room in the basement called Candyland. And it's a room that was designed for the kids that were in the facility. And it is horrifying. It is a horrific looking place.
Dude,
they had
the paintings.
The paintings,
the paintings that are still there from like the...
Yeah, from
the 50s,
whenever they did
whenever
them.
they made them. Like,
they made the beams of the pillars look like candy canes. So they're red and white. They have these very strange pictures of like boys and girls playing on the walls and gingerbread houses, and it is something straight out of a horror movie.
Fucking awful.
Yeah.
Like if you ever get a chance, just Google pictures of Pennhurst Asylum Candyland.
Yeah.
Instant creepy vibes.
Yeah. People have had their hair pulled down there, touched. There was an instance where a group of girls were in the bathroom, I think they said, and somebody pulled, or their hair got pulled and like a window broke or something like that, and they all ran out. And crazy. And then also the tunnels. It's pretty self-explanatory. We already talked about those, where it's alluded that patients were brought down there to be quote-unquote forgotten. And by that, killed, disposed of, never to be seen or heard from again. Reports down there are disembodied voices, kids running around, kid voices. They have an EVP that was taken down there. When somebody asked, "How old are you?" they heard a response saying 7. So it's could be kids down there running around in the afterlife, in these tunnels, because that's where they were sent to pretty much go play.
Oh, it's awful.
And yeah, it's creepy stuff. It's horrific stuff. It's I mean, I can't imagine.
That's the scariest. That's the scariest part about this, dude. It's because it's not like we do episodes on cryptids and stuff like that, where there supposedly is this thing running around the forest somewhere,
right,
or supposedly this individual was attacked by this, or abducted by aliens, or something.
Or even in this case, it's supposedly haunted.
Yeah, supposedly. But
in real life, like in real historical fact,
traumatic shit happened. At
real
this
life
point.
horror stories happen.
Like there was like a fucking dude ripping teeth out.
Yeah.
There were like orderlies beating the shit out of these like individuals. Like this was like real.
They could not defend themselves.
That couldn't defend themselves. That they had no idea. Just like thinking about it like is like making me teary eyed thinking about like how like holy
the
fuck.
Day to day and
like
these orderlies doing things to patients that rhyme with grape.
Exactly, yeah. And like these are like 10-year-old kids that literally like that you're just a 10-year-old kid and you have literally no one to defend you. Like,
and you have no idea why it's happening
exactly.
to you. And you have no idea how to stop it from happening to you.
Fucking terrifying. Yeah. Like that is like the scariest thing about all this shit. And like if you want to get like a pretty good depiction of like how these conditions were, I'm sure there's a couple movies out there, but American Horror Story Asylum, it kind of hits the nail on the head on like how some of these like conditions were actually back then, because it just details they look like, honestly, like prisoners. Like they didn't treat them like people.
Yeah, and even in the footage that they were showing in the documentary, the people there look like skeletons almost. They were so malnourished,
yeah,
just
like,
disgusting, running around naked, defecating on themselves, smearing it on themselves just in hopes to get a bath.
Oh my gosh! Like and yeah, you said like malnourished. It kind of honestly, I was also getting the vibes of like some of the photos we see of like the concentration camps in Nazi Germany in the 40s or whatever, and it's just a terrible thing. And like I said, that's the scariest thing about that was just the fact that
And there's also, I think they said there was a possibility that inmates were just shot there, or at least one account of somebody being shot there. Yeah. They don't know for sure, but wouldn't put it past them to have people just there with guns and just take them out of the tunnels and back.
Yeah, get rid of them. I wouldn't. Yeah, this is terrible.
Shows you how low society can go when unchecked. When it comes to an unhinged mindset mixed with a unstable work environment.
We didn't even get into that. I bet you if you do some real digging behind it, like you can probably find, just from the bureaucracy side of things, why the state was so hell-bent on cutting funding and all that, whether it was driven by eugenics, populist politics, or whether it was like, hey, we can save money by, cutting funding from this, like whose pockets were getting lined by making those decisions.
Yeah.
Like, it's just terrible.
And another thing that I kind of want to add as we're wrapping this episode up is that since it closed in the late 80s, there are still people that know what it was like to work there, to live there, and they still are around. Like, it's not like this. When I think about it, I have this image of this traditional 1930 Arkham Asylum type place that only existed 60 years ago, where all the memories are long forgotten. No, this was only 40 years ago. There's still people that grew up, like that was probably their first job, being an orderly at Pennhurst Asylum, and seeing all this stuff happen firsthand, and just, one, letting it slide, or two, being so afraid of the things that would happen in there that they couldn't tell anybody until this expose came out, obviously. But I mean, it's crazy.
I'm more than sure, although there were probably many orderlies there that, like you said, they probably wanted to say something, but they probably felt like the system was stacked against them.
Could have been.
They've been like, okay, I can report this, but nothing's going to happen. I can't even get brawl sent to me, for my residence here. Yeah. So, and
then if you tell your higher ups on what's going on, then who's to say that higher up isn't the one doing the beatings and stuff to these inmates? They're gonna come after you next.
Yeah, he's like, no, you can make a huge mess out of this, but you're gonna regret it. There's gonna be consequences for it. Yeah,
right.
It's just like, oh my gosh.
I'd be interested if there's anybody listening to this episode that has worked at Pennhurst Asylum or knew anybody that lived there. What your experiences were with it? What your working conditions would have been, or living conditions, that if you knew somebody that lived there, what that was like, or if you've had any ghostly experiences there investigating it.
Something like we're always down to hear hear from our listeners out there, and if you have any relatable stories or anything like that, we always encourage you guys to share. That's always a plus.
Yeah. So, man, what a horrific place. But like we said, it's a haunted attraction now. And definitely one of those places that is almost too scary to go to, but I want to go. I want to go see it.
We should do an episode there.
It's not that far away from us, I don't think.
Mm-hmm.
So
it's right outside of Philly, isn't it?
I think it's on the western side of PA.
Is it? Okay. Take
a little road trip up there.
Road trip. Some EVP.
We got to get some ghost hunting equipment first.
Oh gosh, what if that's what this turns into? Well, we started out as a podcast, and now we're ghost hunters. Just naturally.
Oh yeah, you're right. It's outside of Philadelphia. It's a 2.5 hour drive. That's not bad.
It's not
we
bad.
can do that in a weekend.
We could do it. Go get some coffee at no, that's further. I was say Jim Thorpe. at the Hogwarts.
The Hogwarts place.
Yeah.
Jim Thorpe. We've been talking about going to Jim Thorpe for like 2 years. We should make that happen.
We were looking at going there.
Yeah.
Because I have a train ride that goes through right now.
Yeah.
With the snowy weather and stuff. But
that
then
would be pretty.
we were on TikTok and it's like, don't do it. It's overhyped.
It's not worth it.
It's not worth
I looked at the map of Jim Thorpe, and now that we're closing this episode out, we'll get a little lighthearted because that was a heavy episode.
It really was. It really was. Trigger alert.
If you've made it to this part of the episode, then. Yeah. But Jim Thorpe is so small. It's so tiny. There's like 6 places there. There's like 6 shops, and it's almost like Harper's Ferry.
It's like you get there and this is Jim Thorpe. This is it. Like,
you blink and you miss it.
You're like you take one step in that direction, you're walking and leaving at the same time.
It's picturesque as all get out, though. I mean, it's beautiful. It looks beautiful.
I think like all the Poconos in general is like that, where it's pretty beautiful
for sure.
Nice foggy weather. Well, we'll see. Maybe, I don't know. That'd be cool to do an episode at Penhurst. Mm-hmm. Because it is like a ghost attraction.
Take the podcasting equipment up there, just set up in one of the rooms, see what we can do, see what we can find. Oh, fuck no.
Candyland.
Fuck no. Like, you say the kids scare you and that's the first place you want to go? That's where you want to get into?
Well, I mean, we got to face our fears.
That's your fear, it's not my fear.
If you can survive in Candyland, you can survive anywhere.
That's a bold assumption.
Mm-hmm. If you can survive the horrific hauntings of Candyland, you can survive the horrific hauntings of anywhere.
Okay, they're horrific hauntings, sure. Like, there's places I wouldn't want to go that I couldn't survive, like a desolate wasteland of Antarctica.
Oh, okay. Well, then, it's like, I can survive anything now. Our next episode, we're coming to you live from a fucking volcano. Are you sure you're ready for this? We survived Candyland.
I heard a disembodied voice in that volcano over there.
It's like, it'll be interesting. It'd be cool to see if they're doing anything for Halloween this in 2025.
Oh, I think they're already, I've seen, while I was doing the research, they're already doing a Valentine's Day haunted attraction thing.
We'll see. Yeah.
Peel your eyes out or something like that. Terrifying. But anyways, that'll do it for this episode of Shadows and Sightings. Like I said, if you have any experiences with Penhurst, if you worked there, if you knew anybody that lived there, if you know anybody that worked there, if you know a guy who knows a guy who knew a guy who once walked by it one time, let us know about it. What was the experience? And you can send us that experience on our Facebook account, Shadows and Sightings, a Paranormal Podcast, or our Instagram account, Shadows and Sightings Pod, or send us an email, shadowsandsightings@gmail.com. Nick, anything else to add?
Looking forward to 2025 with some of these new episodes that we're going to hit the ground running with. Well, we've already hit the ground running with 2025, but some of these new episodes that we'll be talking about, so pretty excited for this year.
Hell yeah.
Thanks for listening thus far, guys. You guys are the reasons why we're doing this, so
absolutely.
I'm really excited to see how much we've already grown a little bit since we started this, so I'm really curious to see like how much we're going to grow this year.
Yeah, tell your friends about the podcast. If you're enjoying the podcast, we still have our Printful shop, I think, don't we?
Printful, yeah.
Get a t-shirt, get a hoodie.
Get yourself some stickers of
get
Lurk.
Some stickers, yeah.
Of Lurk Skinwalker.
We're going to try to get some new designs, I think, for 2025 at some point. So
some holiday.
So stick around for that. Yeah, just some things in general. Some updated merch, some refreshers.
Be on the lookout for Lurk Skinwalker. You might be at a pub. You might be at a bar somewhere, and you'll
drinking a nice pint of Guinness for St. Patrick's Day.
And you look in the I don't know, if it's